Hey everyone, welcome to the Kite Paddle Surf YouTube channel. My name's Miles and I'm a local foiler here in Bellingham, and we're here today to talk about this Parawing, the Ozone Pocket Rocket. A lot of our crew here has been having a huge amount of fun learning this Parawing thing over the summer, and a lot of that's thanks to this. Um, yeah, I think a lot of you probably were like me watching the videos through the winter of people in Maui, people in Mexico just ripping on Parawings and, trying to decide, is this sport for me? Is this going to work where I live? And I think luckily, the folks at Ozone have developed something that really makes it easy and accessible for everyone to get into. Um, this is what I personally ride. This is what most of us at the shop have kind of settled on as our Parawing of choice this year. And I thought we'd give you a little breakdown of some of the cool features about it, some of the design things that Ozone's done, and some kind of ride impressions. So I want to start by kind of going through some of the features on the canopy here and how Ozone's designed this. So first thing you'll notice is there are these little flexible battens here on the leading edge. These are all the way across, and there's some even longer ones on the tips out here. This is something that we've seen on most Parawings, and it really helps to make it easy to inflate, keep the canopy really stable. And these things are so light and bendable, you don't really need to worry about breaking them when you're packing it away or anything like that. Another cool thing about the Pocket Rocket, the canopy material is really light. Of the Parawings I've tried, it's one of the lighter ones on the market, which is great. It makes it fly better in lighter wind and makes it really pack down into a small package. And you'd think with such a light canopy material that you'd be sacrificing some in terms of, stability up in the high end of the wind range. But what I really think is impressive about this wing is that it has great stability and great top end. And a lot of that, I believe, is down to some of these design choices they've made. You'll notice that something this Parawing has that a lot don't is this line here that runs all the way across the canopy and sort of links everything together. And I think this is what gives it such great stability and great wind range. You can really tell when using the Pocket Rocket compared to some other Parawings, both when you're trying to pump the wing to get foiling, and also when you're really at the top of the wind range. This does a great job feeling really rock solid, not feeling like it's kind of collapsing in on itself or deforming a lot. It just keeps a nice solid shape and, really helps to deliver that sort of predictable feel. Another great thing about the canopy on this one is that no matter what side or what color option you go for, the leading edge is always going to be a contrasting color to the bulk of the canopy here. And, Parawinging, you're definitely going to find yourself at some point in the water with the wing all knotted up, and you're trying to untangle it and, figure out what's what and get it flying again. And just having that contrasting color makes it so much easier to sort of find the leading edge and sort of start from there when relaunching it or when untangling it. So that's been a great feature, just making it a little bit easier to use, making your learning experience a little bit less frustrating. So moving on from the canopy, I also wanted to talk quickly about the lines here. This might seem like a sort of small thing, but once you get into Parawinging, you start to realize that all the little details on these things really make a big difference, especially when you're learning. And I think the lines are something that Ozone's done a great job with here. A lot of the Parawings on the market use these sort of double braided lines. They're almost like a very small paracord, and they stitch them over on the ends to make the connection points. And the Ozone Pocket Rocket's a little bit different here. This line is all made out of Dyneema, which is kind of the industry standard for any sort of high performance lines. It's used a lot in sailing, windsurfing. It's what kite lines are made out of. This really is the gold standard, and that's what they've used here. And then for finishing the ends, they're all spliced. And so you have a totally smooth end going all the way through the length of these lines. There's no sort of abrupt cut edges, or big bulky stitches or anything like that. I know that that's definitely a lot more work to produce, and I think it really makes it a more streamlined user experience. Another great thing about the lines is on all the sizes and colors of the wing, you'll see that the lines are all different colors. So these back lines are going to be this dark gray. Your B lines here are going to be blue, and your leading edge lines are going to be this red. And just like with the color differentiation on the leading edge of the canopy, it just makes it so much easier when it's all knotted up in the water to sort of decode everything and untangle everything and figure out how to get it flying again. So that's definitely a huge help. One thing that's been a big sort of topic of conversation in the Parawing world is line lengths. And the Pocket Rocket, I would say, has maybe average length lines or maybe slightly longer than average of the Parawings that I've tried. And, before I got into parawinging, when I was just thinking about the concept of it, I think I thought that the most important factor to me was going to be, short lines, super quick and easy to stow it. But as I've actually learned it, I've kind of changed my opinion on that. I think you spend so much time, flying the Parawing, whether you're going upwind to do a self-assisted downwinder, whether you're just going out for a flat water session, even if you're doing a car shuttle downwinder, you still spend a lot of time getting out to the bumps, popping up on foil, and then maybe at the end of the downwinder, you have to get back in. So you just spend so much time with the Parawing flying that I really think the most important thing is having a Parawing that flies great. And once you get a little bit of practice, you'll pretty quickly realize that stowing becomes pretty easy. And for me, I'm about 5'11". On a 3 meter like this or the 3.6 that I have, it's still easy to do one full pull of my arms and collapse the wing. Once you go into the larger sizes, it's maybe just slightly more than one pull of my arms, but I still don't find it to be too hard, even on the 4.3, to collapse it. So for me, I would take slightly longer lines, which tend to give a little bit more low-end power and a little bit more stability. I would definitely take that every day over, sacrificing your wind range, sacrificing your stability of your wing just to get shorter lines. But I do think that's kind of an interesting trade-off. So in summary, I don't find these lines difficult to use at all. I really like them, and I think it adds to sort of the performance characteristics of this wing. But it is something to know when you're looking for wings. If you want the absolute shortest lines, absolute easiest to pack thing, there are some other wings on the market that might offer that. But I think overall, with how stable and high performance this wing is, it's well worth not having the shortest lines on the market. Now I want to talk about the control bar. This is what you're really going to be, touching every time you use the wing. So it's a super important thing to have be really nice. Ozone's done a great job with this. It's very light, stiff. You can see that it's wrapped in this really nice brushed foam all the way up. The end fittings are these nice contoured plastic ones. That'll help, make it a little bit harder for lines to get wrapped or twisted around the ends here. And like I was talking about on the color with the rest of the Parawing, that continues here. So you've got, this red section on the foam, which marks sort of the front or the leading edge part of your bar. And again, that seems like a small thing, but when you're out on the water, it really does make it easy if everything's color coded. So that's a huge plus for me. In terms of the length, similar to the lines, I would say this is, in line with a lot of the Parawings on the market, not as short as the shortest ones. And, again, for me, I think that little bit of extra length, while you do sacrifice a bit in packability, I think it's really nice to give yourself a little more room. It's easier to swap your hands around when you have a little bit of extra real estate on the bar. And it's easier to mount things like a leash, a harness, all that stuff without sort of running out of room to still have your hands on the bar. You'll notice I have a harness line here. And I think for anyone who hasn't tried parawinging yet, that's one of the biggest pieces of advice I would give you is get a harness line set up and have a hook or some kind of harness before you go out, even for your first session. Especially, with these first generation of Parawings, I've tried a lot on the market. They're all like this. They pull hard. And, if you have a harness, it really makes it pretty easy to handle. But if you don't, I think you'll find yourself having your session cut short quicker than you'd like, because you're going to get a lot of arm pump without a harness. But luckily, you get a little harness hook on, and it really helps make these things controllable. You can do hours-long sessions, no problem. You can go upwind for miles, no problem. This is just one that I made out of some Dyneema with some bungee cord in it. But Ozone sells a really nice line that's just plug and play with this. So that's a great upgrade to think about when you're purchasing a wing or a Parawing. Another thing, and I don't have it shown here, but whether you use a leash or not is really personal preference. I prefer to use a leash. And so, hooking that anywhere on the back of the bar down here. So either hooking it right to the back of the bar or to this little piece of line that comes out of the back of the bar is my preference. And again, Ozone sells a little, cheap Dyneema bungee leash that you can put on there, and you can put that to your waist belt or to a wrist cuff or anything like that. So another upgrade to think about. But overall, a really nice bar, really makes using the Parawing a lot easier. The number one thing you'll notice about this wing is it has excellent top end. It really feels like, especially if you have a good harness setup, the top end is crazy. I don't want to say there is no top end, but you can take these up very high into the wind range. So for me, on a 3-meter Parawing, that's just the smallest I have, I feel like I can pretty much go out in anything that I would have interest in going out in. So anything up in well into the 30s, maybe even starting to touch 40 knots. And so I think that's the biggest plus of the Pocket Rocket, especially compared to some of the other Parawings on the market. Overall, it's just a really high performance wing. Goes upwind great. I've found that in general, I can do the same upwind angles that I could on my wing setup, maybe even slightly better in some conditions. So you can really make a lot of ground upwind if you're considering those, no car shuttle upwind, downwind runs. As far as low end, I think the low end is still pretty good. The pumping is very different on a Parawing to a wing, and you can't really just absolutely muscle your way up when you're super underpowered like you sometimes can on a wing. But that being said, I still think the low end is pretty solid, and it's definitely competitive with all the other Parawings that I've tried on the market. In general, in terms of wind range, on a 3-meter here, I would say it would take probably about solid 20 knots of wind for me to get going in that, and that's with kind of a mid-length board, a little higher volume board, a little bigger foil than I might use for winging. But I would say this 3-meter can take me anywhere from like 20 solid up well into the 30s. And my 3.6, which is my bigger wing, I can probably start that around 15, 16 knots sustained, maybe gusting a little higher than that. And I can get going on that and ride well up into the 20s. When you're considering a quiver of these, I think the most common quiver that we've seen people riding around here is a 4.3 meter and a 3 meter. And that'll cover you all the way from, sort of the mid-teens well up into the 30s. Makes it a little easier if you have a slightly longer mid-length board. That's going to really extend the wind range of any given size. So that's definitely something to think about when you're, looking to get into Parawing. You don't need a mid-length, but it does make it easier in terms of having a big wind range on each size of Parawing. We've also seen some people that are a little smaller, or maybe they ride in high wind venues predominantly, think Columbia Gorge, stuff like that. They might go with a 3.6 as their big size and a 2.4 as their small size. I do think, given the wind range, you don't need to have one every size. It's definitely okay to skip a size on these. So I've been Parawinging pretty much this whole summer, as have a number of people in town and people here at Kite Paddle Surf. So far we found that these are really pretty durable. It really helps not having the high pressure inflatable leading edge that a wing has, which can puncture and explode easily. These are pretty flexible, and even though they're light, we haven't seen a lot of issues with them ripping or breaking. My 3.6 is probably my most used wing. I've got quite a number of sessions on it, and I haven't noticed any sort of performance degradation over that period of time. Obviously, Parawings are still new, so the jury's a little bit out on the long-term durability of these, but so far we've had no issues. In terms of downsides to the Pocket Rocket, I really don't have a lot to talk about. Like I said, I really enjoy this Parawing. But one thing that I do think Ozone could maybe improve for the next generation is having a dedicated leash attachment point. It works pretty good to just attach your leash anywhere here on the back of the bar. I wrap a loop around this little pigtail right here on the back lines. But it would be great to see something just built in where you can just clip it off to a loop or something like that. Like I said, not really a big deal, but would just be something that's nice to have integrated. So overall, this has really been a shop favorite of us this year. And I do want to say just, no matter what your budget is, just get out there parawinging. It's such a fun sport. It's really revitalized my love of foiling. And so whatever you can get your hands on, whatever you can afford, just get out there and enjoy it. And, feel free to give us a call here at the shop or drop a question in the comments if you have anything you want to know about, Parawings, what gear to choose, what conditions might be good for it. Just let us know. We're all stoked on it, and we're happy to help you guys out with it. Yeah, that's it for this review. Thanks for watching the Kite Paddle Surf YouTube channel, and stay tuned for more reviews.